I'd like to read 2 out of 4 poems that are published in the current issue of Modern Poetry and Translation, which is published, I like to rub this in, Modern Poetry and Translation is published in Oxford, England, and it differs from all Canadian literary magazines in that it will publish my stuff. And it pays every time. The current issue was preceded by an announcement. The edition is themed The Dialect of the Tribe, and it asked for translations into English of poems from minor languages. And what I submitted was 4 poems, 4 translations from Itzik Munger, who wrote in Yiddish. But Munger himself, at the beginning of his career, published a collection in Yiddish in Warsaw in the 1930s called Velker Zingen, a collection of translations into Yiddish of folk songs from many languages. And among the languages were the Gypsy language, the Roma language. So what I submitted to Modern Poetry and Translation and what they've published were 2 of Munger's translations by me of 2 of Munger's translations into Yiddish of Gypsy poems. Besides that, Munger himself, later in his career, wrote a lot of poems with Gypsy themes and characters. He seems to have sensed an affinity between the Ashkenazi, the Eastern European Jewish culture of which he was part, and the Gypsy culture, which is something that later on, or at the time, the Nazis also agreed and treated, it's not necessarily that well known, treated the Gypsies when they could find them the same way they treated the Jews. So I'd like to read one of the Gypsy poems, one of the translations by Munger of a Gypsy poem, and then a Munger poem with a Gypsy theme. So the Gypsy poem is called, I'll read a few lines in the Yiddish. I can't, he didn't reproduce the originals. So in Yiddish, this poem is called A Gute Eize. Räuscht das Wasserl hinter der Mill, steht das Mädel und hört zu still. Mädel, dem Kovel hab nicht hold, verschmiert und versaschet ist Tomit der Jold. So those are the first 4 lines. It's quite a short poem. I'll just read the translation. Suggestion. The streamlet murmurs behind the mill. A maiden stands and listens still. Maiden, don't think the dancer is cool. He is greasy and sooty and always a fool. Believe not the traveler, pretty miss. He always forgets his promises. Even the knight with his pallid face. Don't love him, he will bring you disgrace. But choose the klezmer, and your heart will spin with the joy of love in his violin. Now, the other poem is a poem called Birth of the Poem. It's a sonnet by Munger himself. Young gypsy girls lovely daughters of the land, barefoot cousins of the winds and rains. It's a long time since I met you in the country lanes, in horse-drawn homes, in a mysterious band. In my young springtime years, it was my way to dream about my future and to start and run to greet you with an open heart and think on what will come and ask you to say. You murmured darkly. My open palm was clear. The summer wind whispered in your long black hair. The landscape thrilled with lilac, rose, and green. A peacock calling from the edge of night, with moody wings diffused a golden light, and I prayed my morning prayer on an old-time violin. Now, that peacock, the peacock, there's a background to the peacock. In Eastern European Jewish culture, the peacock was considered a symbol of Jewish artistic creativity. And you see if you find Yiddish books printed in that period, you often find a peacock in one form or another, in a colophon or a wood print. There were people, there were sardonic critics who said that the peacock was a good symbol because it had wings that couldn't fly and a voice but couldn't sing. So you are challenged by that to use your imagination. Imagine sardonic Jews.